Hey, what is going on, guys? Jake Verdon Tech here, back with another video. And today we're going to be talking about custom cable sleeving, as we are going to be making some cable extensions that are custom sleeved for the build we're doing in the 011 Dynamic Mini. Now, there are a number of different methods you can use when making custom cables or custom cable extensions. When it comes to different materials you can use and different methods of custom sleeving your cables. In this video, we're going to go over just making some basic PET plastic sleeved cables that are just cable extensions. They're not going to be full-length cables, and there is a number of pros to just doing cable extensions. Talking about the pros and cons between cable extensions and custom full-length cables, I really like extensions because it does take a lot of the risk out of making custom sleeved cables. When you're doing full-length cables, you have to be very careful to match the stock pinout of your stock cables. And what I mean by that is, whenever you have a certain wire going from one point on the connector going to your power supply and going to the connector that goes into your component, it's very important that those match your stock cables, because if you end up mixing these up on your power supply, each port can have a different type of voltage, or it could have a ground. You want to make sure that those are consistent, because if you mix them up, there is the possibility of damaging your components. So when you are doing custom cable extensions, all you're doing is just making straight lines from the female connector to the male connector, and you're just extending the existing pinout of your stock cables, which takes all the risk out of it, and you don't have to worry about the pinout. Now, one thing you do want to be mindful of is you don't want to cross two wires on accident in your cable extensions, but you can visibly see, just going from point A to point B, pretty easy. So there's a lot of risk that's taken out of just making regular cable extensions. And with just making extensions, you use a lot less materials, which is always a plus too. So a while back, I did do a full guide on cable sleeving, either extensions or full length cables, kind of a whole guide just breaking down the whole spectrum of custom cables. But in this video, I kind of want to condense it down a little bit, make it a little bit less lengthy and wordy, and just kind of get the main points to you guys and pros and cons between some of the different options out there when it comes to custom cables. Now, going over the materials you will need, there is quite a few materials and tools that you'll need. The tools being, you'll need a terminal crimper to crimp on the ends to these wires. A good pair of wire snips always comes in handy. You'll obviously need the connectors and the terminals for actually making the cables as far as materials go. Then you'll need some 16 gauge wire and your preferred type of sleeving, and also some sort of measuring device just so you can measure out the 16 gauge wire when you cut it and the sleeving. And whether you're using PET or paracord, you will need a lighter. And then also, if you are going the PET route, the technique that we actually use some particular heat shrink that I purchased from the same site that I get all of my cable sleeving materials from. I'll make sure to link that below. Not sponsored or anything, it's just the site that I've been getting all of this material from for a while now. So starting this off and making your custom cable extensions, the first thing you're going to want to do is cut your 16 gauge wire to the right length that you want for your extension. So for our particular build and the 24 pin that we're working on, we want it to have a nice natural curve to it, kind of like this cable here. As you can see, it's got a nice bend in it if we want it to connect to the front component and wrap around to the back. That bend definitely makes it nice and easy. And the way you achieve this is when you do go to cut your 16 gauge wire, you want to cut the outer part a certain length, and then you want to go approximately a ½ inch shorter on the inner cables for your cable extension. So in our case, for the 24 pin, we ended up cutting some 9-inch pieces for the top lane of cables. And then for the lower lane of cables, we are doing 8.5-inch pieces. So it gives it a pretty nice natural curve. And if you wanted this to be a little bit tighter, you could probably just do a 3/4 inch shorter cables on the inside, and it might tighten it up even more. But 1/2 inch is usually pretty safe to do. So once you have all of your 16 gauge wire cut, you're going to want to strip the ends on both sides of the 16 gauge pieces of wire. And you just want to strip a little bit off of each end to where you see the bare wire, and pretty much just enough to where you have the outer wings of your terminal pins to grip the covering of the wire, and then the inner wings can nicely hold the inner bare wire of your 16 gauge wire. You can use either a wire stripping tool like we did in this video, or you can just take some wire snips and carefully just edge off the coating of the wire and just pull it off that way. But having a good pair of strippers definitely comes in handy and can make the process go much faster. The next step is to crimp the terminal pins on the end of your wires. In this case, for cable extensions, one end is going to have a female terminal pin, and on the other end is going to be a male terminal pin. And basically, the easiest way is just to take those outer wings and crimp them to where they fold into a circle. That way it'll hug the wire as you're trying to crimp it. And then pretty much just put it in the right teeth and jaws of your crimper. Make sure the wire's lined up and in properly to where the outer wings are just gripping the outside shell of the wire, and then the inner wings are able to crimp around the bare wire inside. So once you have all the ends crimped, it is time to actually sleeve the individual cables. Now in this case, like I said, we're using the PET plastic sleeving, and we're going to be using a heat shrinkless method. So we do apply it by using heat shrink, but we will be removing the heat shrink and it won't be a part of the final product. So in this case, you just run the sleeve over your wire, and you want to cut them to where it just kind of covers the beginning of your terminal pin, kind of where the outer wings lay, and you just kind of want to adhere it to that part of the wire. So once you have your sleeving over the wire, you can put a piece of heat shrink over it, and we're just going to heat that heat shrink up to a bubble. And what this is going to do is this is just going to kind of squeeze the sleeving to the wire, and when you heat it up to a bubble, it'll kind of melt it to that terminal pin and the wire, adhering it nice and neatly. Usually this is the best way too if you don't want to burn up your fingertips like other methods where you're just using paracord and heating it up to where it's pretty much melted and then pinching the wire. This method works a little bit differently, and it might save your fingers a little bit. Now, I was having some issues with the lighter I was using for this. I think it just was a little bit too hot, but usually any kind of Bic or stick lighter works perfectly. But a torch like this can be a little bit tricky just because it heats it up so fast. So I tried to hold it at a distance, and then as I did heat it up, I would get a little bit closer and start to get that bubble. And then that way I knew the wire was nice and melted on the bottom. Lastly, it's time to run the sleeved cables into the connectors, and you just want to make sure that you're putting the male terminals into a male connector, and vice versa for the female terminals and connectors. And before you do run the connector on both sides, you can put something like a cable comb, like we did in this case, and run them through, and it just kind of bundles up the wires nice and neatly. So that is it for this one, guys. Like I said, just wanted to make more of a condensed video of my longer tutorial that I made when it comes to custom cable sleeving, as it definitely was a lot longer and a lot wordier. So I just kind of wanted to get this information out to you guys, as I'm doing this as kind of a build vlog on the 011 mini build that we're working on, and to kind of shed some light on making PC cable extensions and kind of how it's a good safe way to modify your PC a bit more. Personally, I don't really enjoy making custom cable sleeve extensions or full-length cables anymore. It can be kind of tedious, but I think the result is well worth it, and it really gives your PC that good custom touch. It kind of takes your PC to the next level, opposed to just buying parts and throwing it in a box. If you guys enjoyed the video and found it helpful, make sure to drop a like on it, and if you want to see more tech-related videos like this one, be sure to subscribe. As always, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.